Hi, I'm Kent. Let's make a new maker's mark. It's a new year, which means I need a new maker's mark. The maker's mark I made last year had the year in it, and that is so I can keep track of my evolution of pots over time. So I want to update it and make one that has the current year. So here is my maker's mark. You'll notice it has some black on it. I'll talk about that in a second. I went ahead and 3D printed this on my 3D printer. So it has Dr. K 2022 and it's backwards. And that's so when I push it into the clay, I'll get the mirror out of it and it'll show up correctly. So here is one of my pots where I've used it to imprint the Dr. K. The timing of getting the imprint just right is a little bit tricky. At least it's a little bit tricky for me. My schedule with my pottery is rather erratic. And so catching the pots when they're just the right level of hardness to use this stamp has been a little bit tricky. Sometimes I get it and it works pretty well. Other times not so much. Sometimes it's too wet and the stamp winds up sticking. Other times it winds up being too dry. And so here, I actually didn't get any good imprint. There's a faint hint of the outline of the stamp on one side, but it didn't go down very far. Other times I've waited too long, it winds up actually cracking the bottom of the pot, and that's no good. So that gets back to the black on here. So for some of the pots, I've actually been using this as a stamp for underglaze. So here's a pot where I did it. And this works okay. You can kind of sort of make out the shape if you know what it is, but I suspect if you didn't know what it is, you wouldn't be able to read it. So there's one. Here's another. And a third. And to do this, I actually found this. So I found this on Instagram, another potter was using it, and I went ahead and got it. This is basically a stamp pad. So it's got the foam, but instead of ink inside, it actually has underglaze. So the idea is to take my stamp, I can tap it down, get some underglaze onto the stamp itself, and then take my pot and go ahead and stamp it. The problem is this stamp here is just hard plastic, so it doesn't pick up the underglaze very well. We really want something that's made out of rubber. I was thinking about this a little bit and I realized that I have the ability to make rubber. I have 2-part silicone. So what I'm gonna do in this video is walk through the design for my new maker's mark, and then we will cast some silicone and see if I can make a rubber stamp. So here is my logo. It's relatively simple, as you can see. Before I had the year underneath the Dr. K. This time I shortened it to just the 23 and put it off to the side. Wanted something slightly smaller. This is done in Inkscape, which is a free open source piece of software that lets you do vector graphics. So this is saved as an SVG file. So from there, I went into Fusion and designed this part. So this is a new version of the stamp. And just like the one I showed you, it's backwards so that when I press it into the clay, it winds up being the right side around. So how did I do this? I took the SVG and imported it and put a bounding box around it. I then extruded the letters the right direction. Then extruded a block. So that's the body of the stamp. From there, I just cleaned it up a little bit. I added some draft angles to the stamp, rounded off the edges, and added some draft angles to the letters themselves. These features are pretty small, so I'm not sure that matters too much, but I wanted to do it anyways. So that is basically the stamp. However, I don't need the stamp. I want to make this out of rubber. So what I need is a mold for this. So from there, I went and created a box around it that's totally encompasses that part except for the very top. So I can subtract out the stamp shape from this body I made, and I wind up with a hollow version of the stamp that I can then fill with silicone, and that will be what I want. So from here I went to my 3D printer and printed it out. This is the print I just made. This is exactly the same thing that I showed on the computer, only I played with the scale a little bit. Getting the letters to come out on my FDM printer, which isn't particularly high resolution, was a little bit tricky. So I made 2 different versions, one slightly larger than the other. I'd rather have the smaller one, but I might need the bigger one for the letters to come out. You can read this right now because it's a mold. When I pour the silicone in it, it will be the inverse so that when I can then stamp it into my pad, it will show the right way around on the pots themselves. Next up will be to mix up some silicone and pour in here. All right, so I've got 2 disposable cups. I just need to mix up a little bit of silicone, so I don't think I'm even gonna make it to the first mark. I'll probably use the foot itself as a mark. My silicone's hanging here offside, so let me pour both parts. This is a 1-to-1 by volume silicone. That's part A. That's part B. Go ahead and pour these together. This is going to be more silicone than I need, but mixing up small batches is pretty tricky. Mix this up well. Everything off the sides. This silicone's not very viscous, so it's self-degassing. I don't know if you can see, but there's some bubbles coming out of it. Those should all release. So now I want to go ahead and fill my mold. Try and pour it down the side. There we go, and I think it's going to be overkill, but since I have it, I'm going to pull out my shaker table and we'll put these on the shaker table. All right, I'll let this shake for a little while, and then I will turn it off and let it fully cure. We'll come back to it then. The silicone's cured. Let's go ahead and pop out my stamps. So the silicone is all set up. Let's see if we can pop them out. It's coming. There we go. So it came out okay. It looks like maybe part of the 2 is a little bit damaged. We'll see in a minute. Let's try the bigger one. That one looks like it's in a little bit better shape. Looks like the numbers might be a little bit messed up still. So there are the 2 stamps. So I can put these away and I can cast some more if I want. Let's try them out. To start with, I'm just gonna get some paper here. And I've got my pad. So here's the old plastic stamp. We can do that one for comparison. So I'll just tap it a few times, put it down. Do it again. And that one's a little bit better, but still not very crisp. Let's try the new rubber ones. Tap it a few times. So the ink loaded pretty well. I got the corner a little bit. Let's see. That is horrible. All right, I pushed down too hard. Let's try again. That is reasonable. It was much lighter. Tap. That's pretty good. All right, so that's the small stamp. Load it up. That's pretty good. So there we go, one new stamp. It's not extremely crisp, but these features are pretty small. I have a bone dry pot here. Let's give it a shot on the pot. Let's do a bunch on the sides to start with. So this is the smaller stamp. Light pressure. Oh, that's pretty clean. I got messed up a little bit. Definitely have to be careful not to overload the ink. All right, so that's the small one. Let's try the big one again. Definitely takes a little bit of practice. However, I think this is working better than my old stamp. So there are some of the results. I think I'll try this out for a while and see if I like it or not. I use this for my maker's mark, which has the letters in it, which require a lot of fine detail. You could create a kind of an arbitrary shape and then use that with Underglaze to stamp onto your pots and transfer the design that way. Now I need to start making pots for the new year. As always, if you have any questions or comments, let me know. Thanks.